Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of our Game Maker series. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Elle from TNgineers, the creators of the upcoming indie game APICO. Did I say that right? APICO. Elle, correct me if I'm wrong.
APICO, but I
APICO.
think plenty of people say APICO now that we're outnumbered, so we're just going to have to change it.
Well, we are. It's one of those classic brand. Anyway, APICO. Really excited about this game. Really excited today to talk to Elle. And as always, I'm joined with Jake. Jake and I, we're going to talk to Elle. We're going to break down APICO, talk about Elle, talk to you about your experience as a game developer, kind of your experience in the industry, your experience learning how to develop video games as part of today. We are so excited and grateful to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, I'm really excited for doing this.
Well, let's jump right in.
Go on.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you guys messaged me, I was like, oh, I'll have a listen. And just ended up listening to everything and going through all the games that I really like. And I'm like, okay, what are they going to say about this? What are they going to say about this?
Well,
that's really good.
That's awesome. We really, really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, let's jump right in. And first off, I mean, this is just kind of the introduction. We have a list of questions we sent you, but I think before we get into those, I'd love to just hear, kind of from you. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into developing video games, and then kind of the inspiration behind APICO, and just talk a little bit about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Sure. It was quite a funny one, really, with this, because I don't come from sort of game dev background. Me and my brother have always kind of wanted to make games, and we'll go home at Christmas and we'll just be talking about all these different ideas, things that we've played that year and coming up with our own stuff, but it's just something we never really had time for. And I think it's actually kind of because of COVID and the lockdowns, and over here in the UK, we both got furloughed, which is basically the companies are being paid by the government to keep people on. So, it's a lot of time just sitting on our ass, really. And
yep.
we were playing quite a lot of Minecraft and Terraria, and we used to play quite a lot of the old modded Minecraft, something called Tekkit Classic. So we were like, oh, should we get up a server and just like rinse that for like a month? Because we both got nothing to do. So we were playing that for a bit, and one of the mods is called Forestry, and there's like a bee part of that forestry mod. And meanwhile, Jamie's kind of like mining the planet into oblivion. I've built this little treehouse and I'm playing with these bees. And I was kind of like, there's something in this, like this idea is like, there's something in this beekeeping. Like I really like it, but I was kind of seeing things that I was like, oh, if we did this and did this, it could be its own thing. And I kind of thought, we've got all this time. We'd stop, we've been saying about making games for so long, and we've been given all this time. So, I thought I'd give it a go, and I thought, how hard could it be? And I decided when I started, I was making it in JavaScript because that's what I knew quite well from work. So just making it in HTML5 with the canvas and JavaScript, and just we started making it, and we'd have loads of chats about what we wanted. I had this like notebook filled with all the ideas, and we just kind of made a prototype and played it, and we're like, yeah, we think that this could actually be like a good idea.
Just to clarify, so you came from a little bit of a programming background then, is that right?
Yeah. So for work, I do software development. So
okay, got it.
The code inside was easy peasy. Like I knew what I was doing there. It was just literally everything else that we had no idea what we was doing.
Yeah, I was going to say famous last words, like, how hard could it be? Yeah, I think...
how hard could it be? That was literally my attitude, like, oh, come on, like, I build these apps at work, like, it's just a little game about bees, how hard's that going to be? Very hard. Jesus Christ, very hard.
That's the reoccurring theme that we hear talking to every developer. I just started reading, so I don't know if you're familiar with Jason Schreier, big games journalist. He just came out with a book called Press Reset, where he talks about some of the pains and like angst in the gaming industry and just how volatile it is and just how crazy hard it is to develop games. So anybody who takes the jump into doing this, I mean, I'm always just in awe of. So, I mean, good for you guys. That's a really cool, really fun story.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's awesome. And the people that we've been able to interview on this series, most of them come from incredibly small teams or they're solo devs, and it's been interesting to hear this sort of pattern emerge where they come from a background where they have strengths in one aspect of game dev, whether or not they've started with it, and then they realize this project requires a lot in a lot of different areas for sure.
Mhm.
So you've mentioned this briefly, and I kind of like you to touch on this because Cameron and I, we don't know a whole lot about this, and I'm sure our listeners would love to hear this too. So you mentioned that you started making APICO in HTML5 and using JavaScript, things that you're familiar with, but you've transitioned that to GameMaker Studio 2, and I imagine the project has become much larger in scope. How did you decide to make that decision? I feel like that's a pretty drastic decision. Was everything done from scratch after you moved it, or how did that go?
Yeah, that was pretty brutal. I think the problem that we'd had is, we didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And I was just doing this as a little hobby on the side, and then we made that prototype. Um, but people just kept playing it. Like we posted it on Twitter, and um, we had a Discord, and people were joining that. And I think at one point we had like 1,000 people had played this demo.
Wow.
Um, and we were like, wow, okay, like people, this little idea we had, like people were enjoying it. Um, and
Hmm.
so it was fine. I think it was getting to a point where there were some things where I was kind of running into issues with. I was having to optimize loads of really crazy stuff because, computers just couldn't handle the amount of trees in the game. That sounds really basic. Um, but just like on bigger screens with more trees, the game would just completely drop. There was stuff that we wouldn't be able to do as well because it was kind of limited in JavaScript. And I think we'd kind of just, kind of accepted that and been, well, that's just how it's going to be. We'll do the PC release. I was quite excited for the modding stuff because, it'd just be so accessible with JavaScript because just anyone could come along and just add something.
Right.
So I think that was fine.
Hmm.
But then it was mainly when we came to kind of talk with publishers later down the line. Because when we started, it wasn't something we was thinking about. But when we did talk to publishers, they'd be like, "Oh, okay, so what's it built in?" And we'd be like, "JavaScript," and they'd be like, nope," and just kind of be like, "We're not going to touch that,"
Oh,
because it's just
Really
such a
interesting.
nightmare to do console port with, which is always going to be their
Ah, okay.
big. We want consoles, and basically, if you want console ports, it's like, well, we'll just rewrite the game in C then is the answer, which isn't ideal. And obviously, that's a lot of
hmm.
cost for the publisher, so they're
Right.
not really going to be willing to sync that. Um, so when we talk to our publisher now, Whiteform Games, um, I was kind of like, okay, it's built in JavaScript, but I'll change it like before they could get in and be like, nope. Um, And I'd use GameMaker. It's funny. I'd use GameMaker sort of when I was a kid, when it was called Yo-Yo Games, and it was called the Yo-Yo Game Maker,
Hmm.
and it was drag and drop as well still. And I'd kind of used that a little bit and had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how any of the code stuff worked. And then a few years ago, I'd kind of used the new version, GameMaker Studio, and I kind of played with it and kind of knew how it worked and the scripting I now understood. And it was quite similar to JavaScript. So when this problem came up, it's kind of my first thought. I've not really used Unity or Unreal or Godot or Construct or anything like that. So my first thought kind of went with GameMaker
Hmm.
Studio. And yeah, when we talked with Whitethorn, I kind of tested some of it in GameMaker, sort of the menu stuff, because that's kind of the key thing. All these different
Hmm.
menus you could move around, and I think I rebuilt the menu system in like a day. So I was
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Oh,
this is going to
wow.
be easy. Well, easy, and yeah, I think it took about 3 months, so very easy, and that's like a solid, like a solid 3 months, and that was to redo what had been up
Hmm.
to that point about 6 months work. So yeah, it's a pretty meaty project.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I think Jamie felt a bit not useless, but like I couldn't help too much because it was just a big old code slog for 3 months. With him just being
Mm.
like, "Are you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah." But yeah, it's a big one, but it's worth it. I mean, now like adding things in Game Maker has just been a breeze, and um, I did some mad stuff with shaders, and now I've got like water reflections, and um, the lighting does some really nice
Mhm.
stuff at night, and there's just so many little quality of life things that just I appreciate now, having tried, doing it without an engine, and now I'm like I'm not starting a project in anything else. I'm never doing that again. That was a nightmare.
Running theme through. Jake, is this our fifth or our fourth episode of this? Is this
Our
fifth?
fifth one. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked to 5 developers now, L, and I think all of them are using Game Maker, and they all have similar stories where they started out doing something different and then they transitioned over. So kudos to Game Maker engine, I gotta say, because that's a running theme through all these conversations. That's pretty fascinating, actually.
Hmm.
To tack on to that, I think, I mean, and you mentioned this when you did your introduction. Let's make a game about bees. An
Mm.
interesting kind of throughput like thought. Let's make a game about bees. How did the inspiration for this game? Tell me about like the inspiration for why make a game about bees. How did what inspired you guys to do this game, and then kind of what's the core gameplay loop or a mechanic that kind of got you guys excited that you're building this game around?
I think so. Like I said, the forestry, the Minecraft mod was kind of the key inspiration,
That's right. Okay.
which had the idea of like it essentially just crossbreeding different bees to get new bees. But it was very much like A plus B is C, and do it 100 times, and there's no real
Mm.
reason to get these new bees, and a lot of kind of the process of beekeeping was kind of skipped out. Um, so yeah, I think there was
Hmm.
lots of scope for it, and I think as I was kind of researching new stuff around beekeeping, I was like, there's so much in real beekeeping that you could be doing here. Um, and yes, I think the main gameplay loop kind of came around. You see these different beehives, and you make your own hives, and then you can collect honey in frames, and they've all got these little sort of crafty mini games. So you've got these frames that you can actually like scrape the frames, and then you get an extractor, and you're actually like winding up the extractor to spin round and get all the honey out. Um, and it just ended up when we made it in the prototype, quite a lot of that stuff was from the prototype still. And there's just something really satisfying about just looking after these bees and just going through
Hmm.
these little processes in these little crafting mini games. And then we added later on we added stuff to kind of make it a little bit easier. So you can get clockwork stuff and automated stuff, just so it's not it's a fun little gimmick having these crafting mini
Mm.
games, but after 5-10 minutes you're like, okay, cool gimmick, but let me do something else now.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, even though the main thing
Hmm.
is crossbreed these bees and discover all these new bees, and they've all got their own. It's all kind of like a little puzzle for each one. Um, yeah, the main gameplay loop of actually making the honey and selling all the products um, has ended up being more of a bigger thing than was kind of thought about in the beginning.
Hmm.
Good timing, I think, because I don't know what it is, but beekeeping has like blown up in the past like year. I see
Yes.
beekeeping stuff all over the place, like TikTok, social media, and I mean the fact that you guys played off the real life complexity of that thing, I think that's a brilliant idea. You can see some of it. We have the stream going, kind of showing some of the gameplay, like some of those little crafting mini games you're talking about. That's awesome, man. That's a really
Hmm.
cool inspiration.
Thank you,
Hmm. Yeah,
thank
I
you, I
was
appreciate that.
surprised. Um, yeah, the footage you're seeing is me playing the demo, and I was surprised with how much depth there was. Right, and you just addressed this. Um, you felt like in the forestry mod there wasn't a whole lot of depth to beekeeping. Why am I crossbreeding bees? What do I
Mm,
get out of this? And I mean, people watching this, you can see there's a lot going on, and the amount of depth is really phenomenal. But I also love that in this gameplay loop, you can kind of get into the gameplay loop rather quickly, so you can start producing honey um, soon, which feels good, and so it's easy to get ensnared, which is so great for this type of game. So looking at this game, right? There's a lot going on, and this is a bit of a tangent, but we'll come back to talking about bees in a second. But
Of
what
course.
inspired you to come up with this? Of course, right? This game's about bees. Can't avoid it. Um, what inspired you to go with this particular art direction? So things here, they're relatively minimal, which isn't a bad thing. I think it looks great. It's very clear to see everything. You can see things clearly what's going on. But thinking about this, I mean, your inspiration came from 3D environments. This is a 2D environment. What inspired you to kind of go with this type of artistic direction?
Yeah, I think this was a tough one because, like I said at the beginning, I'd done software design. I kind of did some UI design for quite a while, but I've not an artist. Jamie's sketches like more analog art, but this was something completely different. And yeah, it was a tough one. I think our art style kind of came down to I got so sick of trying to draw trees. I just drew a box, and I was like, "That's the tree now." And Jamie was like, "What?" And I was like, "No, that's the tree. I'm sick of this. I'm so fed up." Um, looking at all these trees because we picked the smaller style because we thought it would be, it's less time to do the smaller pixel art is what we thought, but what it ends up being is an absolute nightmare staring at the same 5 pixels trying to arrange them on the screen. So yeah, we did these box trees, and I was like, "That's it. That's the trees now." And it ended up kind of working, and we kind of liked it. I played with the colors a bit, and kind of made everything else in that sort of similar like boxy style, and it just ended up working really well. I mean, when we started off early on, I kind of had the 2 different Twitter accounts for me, kind of making little devlogs and stuff, and then the main account. And I think at one point I had someone have a go at me on my account for stealing the APICO trees. And I was like, no, that's me. So it's nice that they've kind of become their own sort of little style. Yeah, and the same with the menus, really. Like I said, I'd done quite a lot of UI design. So then when it came to doing the pixel art, that's actually what I kind of enjoyed the most. I know it's kind of like an unpopular game dev. Everyone hates doing the UI. But for me, it's just something quite satisfying about it all being on the pixel grid, and I could be really precise with everything. And yeah, I just really enjoy doing all these different menus, and spending a lot of time being like, okay, what does this need to show? Like, how can that be intuitive? How can we make sure we're not kind of overloading them with info? And like I'll spend hours designing the menu and then put it in the game and play with it in the game and be like, no, that doesn't work at all. Because it kind of looked good in the design, but then when you actually try and use it, it's a nightmare. There's one I'm doing at the moment. I think I've spent like 5 days on this one menu, and every day it's I try a completely different thing, and it's a fun problem, but yeah, definitely take a lot of time doing it, which kind of makes up for the fact that the trees are just a box that's green.
You've talked about you've mentioned this several times, but game development is incredibly hard. We mentioned that at the beginning. You've dropped several conversations. I mean, the design of the trees is influenced by how challenging it is to design stuff, which is awesome.
Yeah,
it works though. It
absolutely works.
Charm.
It looks like an awesome, like kind of unique style, which is, I mean, it's fast. I think leading off that, what's something that you would want people out there to know who are interested in this game about kind of game development in general, and kind of the work or effort that you put into this game? What we'd like to kind of get into the nitty, you've already mentioned several, but I guess what would be your advice? What would be kind of things that you want to tell people about making video games, like from your perspective?
I guess one of the main things is like just the amount of time involved with everything, especially as a small team. It's kind of ridiculous. I'll spend a few days just fixing a bug. Like that's just one bug. It's not something you'll see. A player's not going to know, unless they're the one who found that bug. They're not going to know I spent, 3 days on this bug. And that's 3 days kind of gone from development time just on this one thing. And, it not always coding, like there is 2 of us. Jamie will be doing some stuff on some writing or some of the pixel art stuff, or I might be doing a menu. And between us,
Mhm.
we've spent like a few days on something that the player looks at for 5 seconds and goes to, and clicks next. um, it's just there's so much time involved, and even not even just the admin, like marketing and social stuff. Like, today I'd answer some emails.
Mm.
I was talking with a publisher over something. I was, checking on Steam. There was some people in Gilded that I was talking to for a bit. Um, scheduled some posts on Twitter, and now it's lunchtime. Like, where's the morning gone?
Oh man.
Sat down with like, oh, I'm going to code all these
Right.
things. But yeah, so definitely when it's a small team, um, even in a bigger team, because it's probably a bigger game, and then there's even more stuff going on. But I just think the amount of time involved, yeah, I don't think unless you've done it, people just don't realize just how much time just disappears when you're making a game.
One of the worst parts of gaming culture, unfortunately, is man, we've got toxic video game fans out there who just demand the world, and like the slightest thing just ticks people off, and they go crazy on the internet. I hope you guys haven't suffered through that quite yet. Hopefully, probably you have, because people are probably so excited about this game and they want everything right now. But no, I mean, that's game development's so hard, and I just, when I see, people being toxic on the internet to game developers, especially now having talked to several like yourself, who all say the same thing about how hard it is. I'm like, man, just cut these guys some slack. So we'll cut you some slack. Oh, this is it's already it's already looking fantastic. So anyway,
Mhm.
Yeah, just
sure.
on that note, just as well, like a common thing, not related to APICO, but like a common thing with, everyone loves to say, well, this game was only 1 hour, 2 hours long.
right.
It's not worth that much. It's not worth all this money, whatever it is, $20, $30. But like even just that 1 hour, 2 hour, like you have no idea how much time that was. That was like a year, 2 years, two, three
Right,
different
right.
people all working on this sort of 1, 2 hour thing. Yeah, I just think people just don't realize just how much goes into it.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, they just don't. People don't realize, and it's a shame, because I think I love Jake and I both. We love gaming as the art form, and I think we
Mhm.
try really hard to think about, man, what's the time that had to go into this tiny little asset? Like you just mentioned, 5 days working on one element of a UI. I mean, that's just insane. That's mind-boggling. I think most people in their day jobs, like if I have to spend more than a day on any given project, I do like minor coding, like data analysis, data analytics, and stuff. If I spend more than a day on something, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was like the hardest project I've ever worked on. So the fact that you're spending 5 days on a UI piece is absolutely
Mhm.
crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, that sort of disparity between time, right? As a game dev, how much you're putting in, and then the example you gave, the player might look at this for 5 seconds, right? But you've put in
Mm.
3 days of work. That's interesting, that sort of disparity. Yeah, I think it'd be good for a lot of us who like to game to sort of understand that. But let's get back to the bees, right? I mean, the real heart and soul of this game is bees. And something I just have to point out really quick. I've loved seeing all of the bee puns everywhere. They're and they are everywhere. They're everywhere in the game. They're everywhere on Twitter, in the Discord. I don't know, it definitely adds to the charm of the game for sure. Um, but talking about bees, I guess on a little more of a serious note, especially recently with all of these big announcements that we've got from AAA studios, there's a lot of mixed messages about games being political or too political. And we kind of feel like with the game you've got here, you just throw that conversation out the door and you say, hey, this is about bee conservation. There is a lot going on here about bees. And so, what kind of inspired you to make that type of decision? How is this game also functioning as a platform for something that you are passionate about?
Yeah, I think it was an interesting one. Again, like, it just started as this hobby thing, and then suddenly loads of people were playing it. Um, and I didn't use Twitter much, so I was kind of new to Twitter, and there's kind of indie dev circles in there. but the more I used it, the more I realized there wasn't that many B games. I think I found like 5 on Twitter. That was it. We're all great friends. We've got our own little group chat. But yeah, there just wasn't that many at all. So I realized, like, the most that some games get is, here's a hive, it makes honey, sell that at the shop, and that's it. That's like most games. That's all they're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we're being like, the game is bees. Like, everything is bees. Everyone's got bee in their name. Like, it's we go overboard with it. So it's kind of like, it'd be bad to not be trying to use this as a platform in some way. Especially, with Save the Bees, it's always a big thing. Like, any part of the year, I know recently it's kind of picked up, like, say, I think we're probably thinking of the same person, the beekeeper on TikTok, that's just always doing some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of getting more attention to stuff. So it was definitely like, there's just no excuse to not be using it. But at the same time, like you said, different games get different flack for trying to be too political. So we're like, how can we kind of, for some of the stuff like the conservation stuff, how can we get that into the game so it's not like, a thing popping up and being like, now you have to save the bees, and just doing it in ways that you get these different species, and you can kind of like rehabilitate them into the wild, and you get basically a score for each one. It's kind of an optional thing, but you get rewards for doing it. So it's kind of a constant thing that's always there of, we're kind of tracking it and whether you're going to do it or not. But then at the same time, we've got kind of our website, and I think the homepage of the game has kind of like links to different resources and different charities that you can go to, and things that people can do themselves, just some little how can you help stuff. And then when we finally release and we hopefully make some sales, we're going to do just a portion of all the sales. We're just going to do to different beekeeping charities.
That's awesome.
And we're spoken to a few different ones, and just try to get like a range, because obviously we're UK based, so we kind of want a UK one. But then we want some international ones, because it's not just going to be people from the UK playing it. So yeah, it's just one of those things of like, there's just no making a game like this. There's no way you could just not do that and not appreciate bees in real life, and what they do for the ecosystem in the real world, let alone the ecosystem of the game.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You guys are getting involved in, like charities and giving back with the sales of the game. I hope this game does phenomenally well. I believe there was a trailer in the Wholesome Direct. Am I wrong about that? Is that correct?
Yeah, there was. This was a mad weekend.
That's awesome.
Because of that trailer, yeah, it was getting. We've moved over to Gilded from Discord. Completely separate debate. Won't get into here, but yeah, you could tell it's the Whitethorn weekend. We just had so many new people join, and so many people pick up the game, and yeah, it was mad. It's such an awesome event. I think when before game dev, I didn't realize that there was this big, wholesome, cozy game scene. Yeah, and the more I saw, the more I was like, this is incredible to see all these. There's some AAAs, but it's mostly indie kind of picking up the slack and creating all these games that there is just such a need for from players that want these sorts of games. So yeah, it's awesome to see something like the Wholesome Direct, and I know they was doing it last year, but this year it was just huge in comparison to what they'd done the year before. It's mad.
How did they reach? This is kind of a tangent, but did they reach out to you to this? Like, did they just find you randomly, or how did you get that?
Oh no, we applied to that one.
Oh, got it.
That was actually because of our publishers. I don't think I would have known. I probably would have seen it, and then it would have been a bit too late. But Whitethorn have been pretty good of being like, here's every event possible. Go, just apply to all of them, see what you can get.
Right. I think that's the perfect event for this. We watched, I think, the first one. Jake and I are very much, and especially Jake, we're all about these like wholesome indie game style, like, all these different ones coming out. Baron Breakfast and Yokai Inn and like
Oh,
all these different
breakfast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're big fans of these types of games, so we thought it was perfect. Well, we are running out of time. In fact, we're almost out of time here. I'll take just last like minute or two. Is there anything else that you want to say about APICO? Just talking about the game or promoting it, and then where is the best place to follow you or to find information, to follow information about APICO?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess probably the best place is just on Steam, really.
Okay.
You know, the demo's out, the demo's free. I'd just say go and play it and see what it's about. Give us a little wish list. Follow us on Twitter.
Perfect.
We are on Guilded instead of Discord, which is an unpopular opinion with the community, but we're here now. So we're not on Discord, but we are on Guilded. But yeah, if you want to check out the demo, it's out now. We're keeping it updated. It's not going to be going anywhere, so it'll always be there, and we're going to be adding like little bits and bobs as we kind of work on the main game, just so it's kind of, you know, always a good representation of what the full game is.
That is perfect. Well, we will do that. Steam wish list, APICO. We'll get that added to our queues, and we'll ask our audience to do that too if you're interested in this Beekeeping Management Sim bee simulation game. I don't even know how to describe it. I think that was
just buzz really loudly for like 5 minutes, and then that might get the point.
That's
across.
right. And go watch also go watch the recent trailer from Wholesome Direct, because that was super hype, super exciting. Well, El, we are super appreciative for having you come on the show. We're really excited for this game. Release date. When are we going to get the 1.0? Any ideas at all that you can give us?
I don't know.
That's fine.
It should be
2025
next year. 2025. Yeah, give me plenty of time. No, it should be January next year.
Yeah.
It'd be finished this year, but because now with Whitethorn we'll be doing console ports. I've been told by many devs that the cert process is a nightmare and it's going to kill me, and takes months. So yeah, it looks like it's going to be January.
Okay. Well, January, that'll be fantastic. We'll look forward to that. And thanks again for having on the show. And we appreciate everybody listening. Please follow us on Twitter at PreorderCast. You can follow me at MassGeneric, Jake at Jacob_ChipTip18. We will post this podcast episode. You can find it in podcast format, also on the YouTube channel. We thank everyone for listening. Thank you and have a great night.